morning and welcome to Monday Morning Jumpstart. It's a new year full of hope and promise. And with demand for skilled writers soaring this year, it is setting up to be a great one. So to ensure you make the most of it, we're going to kick things off today with a topic that you might expect, goal setting, but in a way that might be a bit unexpected. So Ted, I'm just going to dive on in. When it comes to approaching the new year, what is the first step that you recommend that we take when it comes to goal setting and setting up for this year?
Yeah, I think we'll get to goal setting eventually, but what I'm finding already is everybody's coming to me as a life and business coach with their goals already set. And when I start peeling it back and trying to understand where the goals came from, in many instances, they don't know where they came from. And so for me, what I tell people is before you get to setting goals, which is the natural order, because I think you're right, Rebecca, that's the natural thing people are doing in resetting and getting ready for the new year. They're just immediately putting, well, in many instances, not even putting pen to paper, they're just verbalizing. We'll get to that part, putting pen to paper. But I want people to reflect back on the last year, and particularly given everything that we've been through in this past year, right? Like not only in the country, but for you as a person that's trying to build a writing career, you've been through a lot. And what I'd like you to do is go back and start thinking about the last year. When, for example, for myself, you could easily just start writing down revenue goals for your writing career. You could easily say, I want to get X amount of clients. But have you reflected back on last year and thought about the things specifically that you need to pivot or build on? And for me, what I try to do is really look back and sort of categorize them. So I think about my personal life and my time spent, right? And I think about, did I spend enough time doing this, or did I spend enough time with my kids? Did I spend enough time writing, for all of you out there? And then really a goal would be coming out of some of that reflection. When you think about the last year, emotions, most people would never think before writing down goals to think about their emotional roller coaster that they've been on this past year. And when you do that, I want you to pay specific attention to, if you reflect back and you remember, you know, there was a 2-week stint in July that I felt good. I felt energized. I felt great. Well, why? What was it that you were doing? And so I use myself as an example because I actually do this. I do reflect on the last year, and I usually bring my partner, my wife, into the conversation. And what I realized in my reflection is that I spent a lot of the year just getting by. Right. And if I use the example of working out, in my reflection, I could check the box. And this is what I want you to gain from this idea of reflection. If I go back and I think about this last year, I could easily go, well, I worked out. I worked out 6 or 7 days a week religiously. I did. And I could check that box. Deeper reflection brought me to, you know what? I did work out 6 or 7 days a week, but what I didn't do was do what I needed to do. I was simply getting by and checking the box. And what I realized is that going into the new year, I have to pay attention to stretching, and I have to pay attention to core work. I'm a 50-year-old man. I can no longer just get into the gym, get in there and get out, check the box, because that's not really serving me well. So I want you to start to go back and think about the different categories in your life. If you were to think about the emotional state, if you think about physical well-being, if you think about mental well-being, how did you spend your time? Not even getting to revenue goals or anything like that. So if I left you with one thing this morning to go do before we see each other again, it would go back and give some reflection. And from that reflection, what I'd want you to do is come up with 3 or 4 categories that you possibly would be setting some goals in through the reflection. So instead of just jumping in and going boom, go, what happened in 21? Where was I mentally? Where was I physically? And from that, start thinking about setting goals. Most people don't take the time. I'd say this, Rebecca, my opinion. Most people don't put the time needed into the reflection. They don't put the heart into the reflection, and they don't put truth behind the reflection. Right? They just go into the new year barreling in. It's going to be a new year, new me. Well,
it's funny because when you first started talking, I was writing like, what are the things people probably have done? It's like, I want to make, I want to be, I want to do, I want to lose. Those are very easy things. And if I asked you to do those first, which most goal setting starts with, right? Most people just say, where do you want to be? How much do you want to make? What do you want to be doing? How much weight do you want to lose? And people just write that stuff down. So you're saying, before you even get to that, let's take a step back. And so this week, take stock in how things were. You said emotionally, physically. Is there anything else that we should be looking at when we look at last year? Like maybe give us some buckets of, write this on my paper.
There will be buckets that, you know, you could do the common buckets and we could get into the wellness pillars and all this, but what I want you to do, pay attention to your business, pay attention to your personal life, pay attention to your physical and mental well-being. You may come up with a very specific bucket for yourself. I can give a personal example because that's the easiest thing for me to do. One of the things that I told Angel, my wife, going into 22 is that I wanted to bring depth back into my work, right? And that came through reflection. It's not that I didn't do good work with my clients or want to do, but what I recognize, because of the state of the state, like this has been a tough year on many people, I recognize that in many instances, I kept things here trying to get people through things or whatever. And part of my commitment going into the 22 was to bring depth back into it. So that's not like a typical bucket of physical or mental well-being. It's just something that I came to full realization in my reflection of 21. That I was getting by. I want to bring it deeper.
It's interesting that you say that, because as you were saying that, I was thinking like, what would that show up like for me? For me, it was holding people accountable, whether they worked for me, myself, my family. It was very easy over the last 2 years, and at times necessary, to be able to say, well, you're doing the best you can, sweetheart. Even to myself, I wasn't really holding myself accountable to the things that I should have been doing or shouldn't have been doing, or whatever the things were. And again, even people who worked for me or family, you know, my kids, we're just doing the best we can. And one of my beacons kind of going into this year is that is putting us all on a trajectory of not greatness. If we're just doing the best we can, sometimes I think that is, and I'm looking for you to tell me that this is right and I'm okay, but sometimes there's a time for that. But if we stay on that trajectory for too long, that's going to become the norm. And our end game is going to be much different than where it might have been had we tried to.
Well, I'll say this. Jot that down as a note, because we're going to be spending a lot of time this year on these jump starts. And this is why we're doing these jump starts. That needs to be something that we touch on again. But you grab the essence of what I'm saying, Rebecca, because typically without reflecting back, you would just put down those goals that typically people do every year.
I will, I do. Yeah.
Versus going back and really reflecting on what are the starting points for me? What are the things that I've missed? What are the things that I need to build on?
Okay. So action item for next week. So to reflect back, we'll talk about looking back at our business, our personal, our physical, both maybe what we did, how we felt about each of those buckets, and where we are going into this year. Is that a fair assessment?
That's it. Okay. We're never going to give you a whole lot to do. What I want you to do is come up. What are those areas? What are those buckets that you need to concentrate going on?
All right.
Going into 22.
This is awesome. Okay, guys. So we have our homework for next week. So next week, Ted, I'm guessing we'll actually move forward then with setting goals. We're going to come back with this reflection. So everybody spend time this week taking stock about what happened in 2021, and we will see you again here next Monday. Bye.
See you next week.